Hello, and welcome to Recalibrating. My name is Callum, also known as Wanderloots. Join me each week as I learn to better life in every way possible, reflecting and recalibrating along the way to keep from getting too lost. Thanks for sharing the journey with me. Today's episode is number 14, Finding Your Voice Through Story. Flow based character development. The entry from which this podcast is based on was originally published on September 23rd, 2023. This week, we're going to talk about the pillars of story and how you can develop your voice to tell your story in a mentally healthy way. Last week, I provided 3 tools for your journey of self awareness on the path of self actualization. Tool 1, mindfulness and meditation, which help to improve attention and find comfort with change. Tool 2, journaling, which provides data that can be used to identify patterns in your thinking, enabling greater control over the change that occurs in your life as you develop an understanding of your own story. And tool 3, sharing your story with others, which helps foster community and indicates the experiences that actually resonate with you. This week, we are going to continue by discussing the psychological difficulties with sharing stories online and the deeper reasons why so many people don't bother in the first place. The 3 pillars of story. As discussed last week, story forms the foundation of how humans communicate and share information with one another. To address the issues we face with sharing stories online, it is helpful to look at what actually makes up the concept of story. Story has 3 major pillars: character, setting, and plot. Characters are the players, the heroes on the journey that is the plot, taking place in the world that is the setting. Before we get into the details of how these pillars of story can be used to help with creation and knowledge work, let's take a look at the problems associated with story in an online world. Note, this commentary will apply to your self expression regardless of whether you intend to share your story online. The goal is to help improve self awareness while working towards self actualization, whether or not that actually occurs online. Finding your voice. When I talk about finding your voice, with a capital V, there is a reason I capitalize the word. I do not merely mean speaking or writing your mind with words. I mean embracing what it means to be you across the span of your life. Each person is unique in this world. Each person has a different story to tell. This story is forever in development, changing day by day, week by week, and year by year. The present moment is the culmination of your entire life thus far. Everything in your life has led to this instant: where you grew up, who your family and friends are, where you went to school, what you're passionate about, where you've traveled, etc. This culmination of experience, when harnessed, forms the foundation for your voice. However, each of us does not have one self. We have many facets of ourselves, forming the gestalt whole of our being. Gestalt means an organized whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, synergy. It also means a whole that is inseparable into its individual pieces. In other words, we can have our introverted self, our reader self, our runner self, our artist self, our party self, our science self, our adventurer self, our lawyer self, our engineer self, so on and so forth. The list is endless, and so are the combinations of selves. There is no single self that fully encapsulates the whole of our being. The gestalt self can vary from day to day, changing as our lives change, growing as we grow. So, what do I mean when I say find your voice? If our true self is not one self, but many selves, how can we find a single voice? The answer is that the style of your voice may change regularly, but if you zoom out and see the bigger picture of what it means to be you, checking the pattern woven by the threads of your experience, you begin to notice a certain consistency in the way you operate. If this sounds familiar, it's because I'm referring to the concepts of self awareness and metacognition discussed in last week's episode. The ability to understand who you are and what it means to be you, to recognize the patterns in your thinking and actions. The problem, as talked about last week, is that while 95% of people think they are self aware, in reality, only 10 to 15% actually are. We bounce around between the different versions of ourselves without recognizing that there is a consistent pattern in our way of thinking. Our true self. Our unique way of thinking forms our mind, but the mind is merely our way of framing our unique reality. It is not itself the true self. We are a combination of our mind and body, often reacting physically faster than we can think, using the intuition of our past experience, both actual experience and genetics, to guide our present actions. The mind may make our reality, but many people, most in my experience, are not in control of their minds. Instead, they flit from thought to thought, problem to problem, without separating their self from the problem. They live in states of fight or flight, moving from one anxious thought to the next, reactively solving one problem after another. How then can we recognize our voice amidst the constant struggle that is existence? If we do not learn to recognize our own voice, how can we expect others to? Society says. Finding your voice can be difficult, especially when society suppresses creativity in favor of more, quote, valuable pursuits. Standardized and outdated education systems follow the lead of corporations in promoting uniformity and conformity. I touch more on the hierarchical structures of corporations in episode number 6. In the classroom, you are compared to others who happen to live in the same area as you. Even if you are a great artist, there may be someone better, which makes you feel second class, especially where bell curves are involved. However, in the grand scheme of the world, you may still be incredibly creative and artistically talented. Comparison is the thief of joy. If you are not at the creative top of your tiny little geographically limited echo chamber, you are suggested to follow the standard path, usually involving math or science. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, has long been considered more valuable for society than the arts. Accordingly, many people suppress their creative voice after childhood or have had it suppressed for them since they were not good enough to follow a creative life. While this may have been true in years past, we have technologically evolved as a species to move beyond such conformist ways of thinking. With the advent of the internet, our perspective has, or should have, shifted. We can now instantaneously share aspects of ourselves with anyone, anywhere in the world. We have entered into a digital renaissance of unfettered creative possibilities. Think about the Roman Empire for a moment. After the roads had been built and the wars had been won, there was a period of peace leading to a boom in the arts, the Renaissance. People did not need to build or go to war. They could find patrons who valued their creative contributions to the world, allowing the creative individual to pursue their passion and make a living at the same time. However, to join this renaissance, artists still needed to make a name for themselves. They needed to use their voice to share their self expression and get noticed. Back in the day, this required setting up a stand on the side of the road and hoping that someone within your geographic echo chamber saw and liked the art. Thankfully, we no longer need to limit ourselves geographically. We can use the internet to cast ourselves into the worldwide web of opportunity. Social media and mental health. Voice is really a question of identity and self expression. Who am I? We want so badly to introduce stability into our lives, yet we are plagued by constantly changing circumstances. This constantly changing self perception can form a block for people when they are considering sharing stories with others, either in person, identity, or online, digital identity. The development of the self can lead to self consciousness, worrying about the external self awareness, how others perceive us. We experience imposter syndrome, anxiety, social anxiety, and more mental health issues at the mere thought of sharing an aspect of ourselves online. At the same time, we have FOMO, fear of missing out, at the thought of not sharing our experiences with others. Lose lose. To further complicate matters, when creating a digital identity, an online avatar or character, and developing it, we can be racked with indecision, trying and failing to come up with a single way to express our many selves. Which self do I share? We feel pigeonholed by the options available for our self expression. The indecision can be so overwhelming that it inhibits us from sharing our stories at all. Further, when we look to others to see what they have done and how they have expressed themselves, we begin to feel overwhelmed at the sheer greatness of so many other people. Our imposter syndromes flare up. Who am I to think that others want to hear my story? How can I ever compare to him, her, them? Even if we get past the imposter syndrome and begin sharing our stories, we get caught in the wave of keeping social media, an algorithm, and our audiences happy. We work to create posts to keep up with the algorithm, trying to pump out content to keep this inhuman monster fed. This burns us out as we question, how will I ever make it? The likes, shares, saves, comments, engagement begin to give us an indication of what our stories are worth to the public. We face a constant tension of maintaining our originality and adapting to the style of posts that get the most likes, a paradox between self and other. How can we hold on to our authentic selves while also sharing ourselves with others and receiving feedback to improve? Adding another layer of complexity, how do we do so while improving our following to make money in the internet economy, the creator economy? Natural self expression through story. Now, let's get back to story. The goal here is to recognize that you are the character. When you communicate with others in the world, the setting, you are furthering the plot that is your life. Your voice is how you communicate with others to tell your story and bring them into your worldview. Sharing worldviews helps to validate our reality and foster community. It can be easy to fall into the people pleasing trap and try to tell stories that others want to hear. This is not the way. Instead, we want to identify our voice through our own natural self expression and find a way to weave our experience into stories that build community and, if desired, income. Developing the character. Writing is one of the best ways to find your voice. It takes your thoughts and creates clarity out of the chaos. As noted in previous episodes, journaling is an excellent way to build metacognition, thinking about thinking, to help identify patterns in your reality. I could go into this topic more, but I also recommend reading an article by Anne-Laure Lecomte on the power and value of writing called Writing is Thinking. For now, I'll include a quote from this article, but I recommend reading it if you want to go deeper into the power of writing, which is also a concept that I will be touching more on in the future. Here's a quote: "If metacognition is your compass, then writing is your map. By putting down your thoughts on paper, you can navigate them more easily. As such, and especially in our age of information overload, writing is not just a means of expression, it's a tool for clarity, comprehension, and connection." Anne-Laure Lecomte from Nest Labs. The more you write, the more you will begin to improve your memory and understand the nature of your reality. Patterns will emerge over time. Analyzing these patterns will help you identify how your actions impact your mood and overall life satisfaction. They can help you find engagement with your life in a meaningful way. Personally, and I know I'm not alone, I find that I am most deeply engaged with my reality and experience when I am in a flow state. Finding flow. Flow is a term coined by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, one of the first positive psychologists, someone who studied what happens when the brain goes right instead of wrong. Mihaly defined flow as a state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience is so enjoyable that people will continue to do it, even at great cost, for the sheer sake of doing it. The book, Finding Flow: The Psychology of Engagement with Everyday Life, is, in my opinion, a must read for modern thinking and happiness. Mihaly based his initial research by studying artists, people who would do something for the sake of merely doing it, painting or drawing. This concept has been extrapolated to all fields, but in general is related to a form of creativity. The book Stolen Focus dedicates a full section to flow and Mihaly, providing interesting context on the psychologist himself and how the concept of flow applies to modern life. I highly recommend giving both of these books a read. Positive Psychology also has a good summary of flow, providing details on how to achieve flow more regularly if you're looking for more information. For me, I find flow while reading, traveling, in conversation, shooting photos, editing, making art, playing sports, etc. Each person will find flow in different scenarios. There's no set rule for achieving flow. No longer are we stuck doing things that we should do. Instead, we can build our own world to maximize our engagement with everyday life by finding flow more often. Unfortunately, flow is fickle. It is not the easiest to find. I liken finding flow to playing the lottery. I can sit down at my computer to edit, get a ticket, but whether I find flow, win, or not, lose, will depend on the particular day. The goal is thus to increase the number of times I play the lottery of finding flow. By setting aside dedicated time each day or week to play the flow lottery, I can increase my odds of finding flow and deepen my engagement with life. The 15-minute rule is a great tool for help in this area, typically used to overcome procrastination. Even if you do not particularly feel like it, if you know the activities that generally bring about flow, attempt that activity for 15 minutes to see if you can find flow. If not, no harm done. You can move on to the next thing. If yes, you have won the flow lottery and will be fully engaged with your experience, one of the best forms of existence. The more you find flow, the more your skills used during your flow state task will increase. I have noticed massive improvements in creative pursuits by dedicating time to work on them each week, finding flow more often than not as I learn what works for me. By tracking this progress through journaling, you will be able to identify what works best for you. Over time, you will begin to notice the consistent styles of your experience, how you engage with the world, and the way you craft your words to log your experience. Your voice. Furthermore, by journaling in a closed ecosystem, such as in your second brain, You can create an insulated workspace that allows you to develop your creativity within the echo chamber of your own mind. You can increase your intuition for finding what works for you, more efficiently and effectively locating the areas that improve your original thinking without the distraction of the outside world. In the modern era of the attention economy and constant distraction, this self contained, mindful, and creative world is more powerful than you can imagine. Next week, we will continue with the remaining pillars of story, setting, and plot. If we are each the hero of our own story, sharing the voice of our worldview, the worlds we build provide the setting. Plot provides the rule set for the players interacting in overlapping worlds, playing the game of the creator and knowledge economy. Stay tuned. P.S. I have opened up the paid tier of Recalibrating. All of my content is currently available on the free tier, but I am saving my most valuable discussions for my paid subscribers. If you're interested in learning more about developing your voice, using AI, building your world and automated income systems, all as part of your second brain, please consider upgrading to paid to support me in my pursuit of my dreams of being a creator. Your support means far more than you know. If you found this episode helpful, please consider sharing it with a friend, as they may also find it helpful. Word of mouth is by far the best way for me to build up an audience of true fans, people who really resonate with the concepts that I talk about. My true community. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.